Greetings from the boogie down South Bronx. This is Jeffrey Cortez reading to you another chapter of my novel or comedy book, Memoirs of Pastor Rajatabla, Pentecostal Private Eye. All right, so this is chapter 29. All right, we're coming to a close. There's one more chapter after this, and I some of you might, those of you that were raised in Pentecostal churches and or more strict churches, this might be a familiar image to you. Okay, pardon the noise from the street. You know, we gotta have a South Bronx streets are very musical. With cars blasting by, and it's one of the ways that a lot of us that were raised in strict Pentecostal churches that were not allowed to listen to secular music, even though we didn't have these cars blasting, at least in my time. I was born in the 50s, raised in the 60s, 70s, but then people would blast their music on the windowsills, and we could hear and learn lyrics from secular songs that we're not supposed to learn from. And I was raised in a church that you could be praying at a prayer service, and right next door there was a social club, and you could hear these old romantic Spanish songs blasting from the social club through the wall. So there were times I would pray near the wall and get to hear some of this music. Anyway, this chapter is a chancla named Jesus. A chancla named Jesus. All right, a lot of us are raised in Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Cuba, and other South America. We have bittersweet fond memories of being spanked by our mother, mostly with their sandal or their slippers. This was what we would call chancla. So this one is called Chancla Named Jesus. Part of my itchy nose. So many of you are wondering why I rub my nose a lot. All right, I don't do drugs. That's not it. And unfortunately, it looks like I inherited my great aunt's nose problem. She was constantly itching and scratching her nose. I would joke about it, and now I'm in my 60s, and I'm experiencing the same thing. I'm trying to figure out. Sometimes I put a little cortisone cream, or maybe trim my mustache a little further. We got to figure this out. Anyway, a chancla named Jesus. And a quote from a somewhat anonymous is the ultimate legacy of parents leave is how they dealt with their children when no one was looking. All right, so let's read this chapter. So Pastor Raja enjoyed a small informal reunion with childhood friends from the church he was partly raised in. They told each other how their adult lives turned out. The little neighborhood diner filled with laughter as they updated each other with the latest news regarding certain colorful church personalities they knew. The friends paused in awe as they remembered answered prayers and breakthroughs. There were jokes about the spooky late night terrorist-like terrifying prophesying that gave the youth a scared straight experience accompanied with tongues enhanced background sound effects. Also, the times when soft angelic languages and gentle interpretations were spot on. As the gathering ended, we prayed, tearfully hugged, and parted company with a vow to keep. Okay, let's find out what this is about. As Raha writes in on his journal, Dear Dabla, had a hilarious time with dear friends talking about how we survived our childhood Spanish Pentecostal houses of worship a la Chankshaw Redemption. I shared about elders Fela and Franco's toilet dispute. Gloria shared about her former extremely dogmatic pastor, who once was concerned about Raha's liberal influence on the church youth, sternly discouraged her from dressing modern and wearing makeup. Dress and appearance were reinforced as unchanging biblical truths and senda antigua, that's ancient way, standard. That particular pastor herself, decades later, sports dress pantsuits, dyed cut short hairdos, makeup, and jewelry while pastoring a southern state-based modern congregation. While laughing about this pastora outliving those poor females and males she and her spouse dogmatically exhorted, we also begrudgingly rejoice that she has been granted not to be devoured by past ignorances. Remembering his own excommunication from church due to the length of his hair, Ronnie suddenly began singing a song he heard in an old hee-haw TV show. If you got long hair, there's sin in your heart. If you got long hair, there's sin in your heart. If your hair touch your ears, there's sin in your heart. And you can't get to heaven if there's sin in your heart. Everybody. Heaven, yes. Hell, no. Heaven, yes. Hell, no. Heaven, yes. Hell, no. And you can't get to heaven if your hair's too long. The group also recalled the merchandising of rubber-stamped healing cloths, made in China, Holy Land trinkets, miraculous dental precious metals, and porcelains, fillings, and mysteriously appearing flowing oil on hands and walls. We grieved over the thousands of television sets deemed as one-eyed demons and sledgehammered, smashed asunder, that means smashed into small pieces. Now collectible vinyl records, albums burned, and gold crucifix necklace torn to pieces while singing Cristo rompe las cadenas, that is, Christ breaks the chains. We joked on how all those pieces of gold could have been melted down and sold to help fund deserving televangelists in need of air-conditioned doghouses for their pampered pets. Also remembered water dripping from the ceiling in the middle of a church service and the buckets that had to be placed to collect the water. No heat in the middle of a wicked winter, but still having to sit through a service on hard wooden benches. The chewed gum under the benches. Those silly banners on the walls. Drum sets where kids would take turns. Food for sale after service. Walking up and down the church aisles collecting Avon and Stanley monies. These were there were folks that would supplement their income or whatever by selling out of little catalogs and things like that. So, and there's things that happen still, but more of as a social level media. But it happened often in the churches that we were raised in. Maracas, las maracas, handheld fans, tambourine flying cymbals. The 2-hour long altar call, pulling down the gate and locking it down when services was over. Pastelitos, late night after long service. Selling food as a fundraiser, that's pro templo. Giving out gospel tracts on busy streets. Having lunch in the church basement on Sundays. Pan caliente con mantequilla, con queso y café. That's a hot buttered bread with cheese and coffee. We had a bakery near our church. We giggled and talked about how, although tired, our moms always made sure we met Jesus. That being, whenever they caught us misbehaving at our usual long weekday evening church services with chanclas named Jesus. So they would take care of their chanclas, and which they named Jesus. That's the joke, you know. Do you want to meet Jesus? You know, and that's why I called it a chancla named Jesus for this chapter. Each of us told about other parents' disciplinary striking items, such as leather belts, belt buckles, electrical cords, and wire hangers, which were given biblical names. I then mindlessly asserted, like I had often heard from old-timers, that parents today have become too soft. Then our conversation carelessly evolved into jesting on how we should pattern and sell religious spanking patterns and rods. As we continued to joke and romanticize our past corporal punishment beatings, Millie just wore a sad smile. We hadn't seen her nor her super spiritual mother in ages. They had mysteriously moved away without notice to their friends, church family, and neighbors. Millie had then disclosed how years ago her mother gave her such a severe beating that it landed her in being hospitalized with a medically induced coma. The mother had back then rationalized with the misuse of a nugget from Eastern cultures of Bible lands that there were times when a good shepherd purposely broke a young sheep's leg to keep it safely close to him, creating a bond between them and the mammal, was healed and became fond of the owner's heartbeat. Ultimately, the sheep would not stray away from the flock. It's a popular illustration used by many preachers in their sermons and tragically misapplied by some listeners. Millie asked us, how was that toxic application any different from religious terrorists killing their own rebellious children who stray away from their cultures and belief systems? Millie survived the physical assault, and with much clinical and faith-based therapy, the mother detoxed from her abusive ways. We cried in sadness, cried in rejoicing that the mother and daughter survived the tragedy, and cried promising to be more prayerfully accountable for what is preached and taught in the Lord's name. Okay. Bendición y bendiciones.